Weaving is the life of the people of Pasay. It has been there for centuries already. But now we plan to give it more life, from ordinary mats to something more contemporary na maging part siya ng fashion. Lara is one way of revolutionizing the banig industry, but it does not end there.
Ako po ay si Anita Mindova Ogrimin. Ako po yung presidente ng Basay Association for Native Industry Growth, in short, BANIG. Nakakataba ng aming puso na global na pag-uusapan na ito yung ginagawa ng mga weavers ng Basay. Nung tulungan po kami ni Congresswoman Antan, umangat yung presyo ng banig. Sa ngayon, nakakatulong na kami sa pamilya namin. Pangarap po namin na magkaroon kami ng sariling processing center ng banig. Pangarap din namin, mas umangat pa ang buhay ng mga weavers at saka yung mga nagtatanim din ng tikog.
Gusto namin na ma-encourage yung creativity ng mga Samarno, ng mga Basaynon para mas mapansin pa yung industry na to. And hopefully, it will alleviate poverty as well.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you are all doing fine wherever you are right now. Sit back and relax because today's the first day and let's make the most of our time because today we are graced with keynote speakers who are prime movers of change. And to really make the most of your iPOVCON experience, we would like to ask you to please interact with our speakers by sending your thoughts in our chat box. I would like to inform everyone that our international conference will begin shortly. Please kindly ensure that the protocols for this event are followed. First, your name in Zoom shall appear coded by your honorific name underscore affiliation. For example, Miss Jessa underscore SSU. Second, if possible, please turn on your cameras all throughout the duration of this event. And third, if you have questions, please give them in on our chat box here in Zoom. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, once again, please type them into our question box in your Zoom control panel. I will bring them up later during the open forum. And let us be guided by these online rules and etiquettes. First, turn off the notifications. Those little pings are a bit distractions to the other attendees. Second, turn on the lights. If you can, get proper lighting. Sit near a window or have a bright lamp nearby. Third, look at the camera. It's a bit awkward at first, but your audience will really appreciate your eye contact. Fourth, mute your mic if you are not talking. Fifth, clear the space behind you. See if you can move your camera so it is directed to a wall or a clear spot. Next, please come early. If someone is late, there is no need to recap. And keep it professional. Maintain your professional posture and appearance. Stay present. You might miss out on key information. If you are using your webcam, use your attentive body language. And lastly, give some grace. Be patient with the other participants and allow some grace for any miscommunication that may occur. Once again, we hope everything is set in your virtual rooms as our virtual conference will begin shortly. Thank you, and we will be right back. Last year's POVCON co-host President Dr. Erwin Vincent Alcala of St. Paul School of Professional Studies said, "Poverty is everybody's concern. This global issue on poverty is a moral obligation," he emphasized. Today, we start a movement. We respond to a call for change. We will empower and we will live and rise above the crisis. A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We would like to first acknowledge the people whom we call our allies, our POVCON heroes, as we beat the great villain of poverty. First, we acknowledge the CHED chairperson, J. Prospero de Vera III, CHED Commissioner Aldrin A. Darilag, our keynote speaker from Massey University, New Zealand, Dr. Christopher Galloway. Sir, we also have Dr. Anthony Hallog from the University of Queensland, Australia, and another one from Tra Vinh University, Vietnam, Dr. De Phong Van. Also together with us are our collaborators, the SUCs of Eastern Visayas. We have the co-host for this year's iPOVCON, the Northwest Summer State University, headed by Dr. Benjamin L. Picayo. The 2019 third National POVCON co-host, St. Paul School of Professional Studies. Biliran Province State University, Eastern Summer State University, Eastern Visayas State University, Leyte Normal University, Palumpon Institute of Technology. We also have Southern Leyte State University, University of the Eastern Philippines, and of course, the Visayas State University. We also acknowledge our dear presenters on the different tracks, the panel of evaluators, our facilitators, and of course, our partner local government units, the people of the Philippines, and of course, of the whole world. Welcome to the second International Conference on Poverty, Alleviation, and Sustainable Development. Could we give a virtual applause there, wherever you are? Thank you so much. With the chief aim of combating the pressing issue of the ferocious cycle of poverty, we are, therefore, pleased and encouraged by this momentum despite the pandemic. And I believe that our dear academicians, the local government units, and our speakers are really committed to taking it forward, even to the international platform. Thus, this iPOVCON 2020. And to start, let us acknowledge our Almighty God through a prayer to be followed with the singing of the Philippine National Anthem and the ASEAN hymn.
Bless us all, O Lord, we pray, for loved ones here and near and far away, and everyone for whom we pray. Keep us safe each night and day, the homeless who have no place to stay, those who are suffering in any way, the dying, those mourning or grieving, and all who need God's mercy. Keep us safe, Heavenly Father, when we are at home or traveling on our way, or when we are vulnerable or in danger in any way. Most merciful Father, hear us as we pray for the souls in purgatory or who may be sent there someday. Amen.
bayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas. Kayang mag-ibig, helas ng sinangalan, alam ng puso, sa titik mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, kuya ka ng magiting, sa manlulupin, di ka pasisingil, sa nagatang tutok sa simoy at sa langit ng pagaw, ay tinatang tula, kawin sa pagkayang minamahal. Ang isang ng matawad mo'y tagumpay na naghihinig, ang bituin at araw niya kailan pang ay di maghihinig. Luma ng araw ng walhagit pagsinta, buhay langit sa piling mo. Ang inigaya na pagkay mga amin, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo. Raise our flag high, sky high, and rest the pride in our heart. As and we are born as one, look in our word to the world. For peace now grow from where there is love, and for prosperity to last. We dare to dream, we dare to check together for us now. We dare to dream, we dare to check who's the way of us
iPOVCON warriors. Yes, allow me to call you iPOVCON warriors today because today we start to end poverty. You know what? Throughout history, a battle has never been won by only a single person on a battlefield. It always takes two to tango, as they say, because general truths say two are really better than one. And iPOVCON cannot stand on its own without a great team carrying its banner. So, to give messages this morning are some of the team players on this iPOVCON journey. And to start welcoming us on this momentous event is the governor of the Summer Province University. Let's welcome the Amay Hansamar. Since the beginning, he is one with the university in improving the lives of the Samarnon, with all his initiatives translated to concrete projects and implemented changes in the province. Ladies and gentlemen, to welcome everyone, it is my honor to present to you
mga tao madali hiradaupan, iragi pakitahangatanan, kaupay karisyong kalipay, serbisyong nga maupay ngantuhay, hiragodan aton paglaw. Tara na, action
Good morning to all participants of this virtual confab. This is Reynolds Michael Tan, the Governor of the Province of Samar. The uncertainty of the current pandemic situation, where the normalcy is unsure of the future. I am happy to welcome you all to this new platform exchanging brilliant ideas, the first online-based international conference on poverty alleviation and sustainable development. We value our partnership with the academe. From the beginning of our engagement with iPOVCON over the past 3 years, we have been applying the different studies presented. It is a solid testament that it can help us craft development programs and projects. With this, Samar will continue to fight poverty. This is one validation that we are on the right track. With the significant drop on the latest poverty survey of 22.1% rate among families. The theme, living and rising above the crisis, is so timely of the present day challenges we are facing. It is with earnest hope that the discussions and presentations here will characterize the lasting solution to our poverty concerns. I am sending my overwhelming support to the success of this virtual conference. Mabuhay kitang tanan, damo ang salamat.
Mga tao madalihira daupan Iragin pakita hangatanan Kaupay karisyong kalipay Serbisyong nga maupay ngan tuhay Hiragodan aton paglaw Tara na, action padayon.
Everyone, that was Governor Michael Tan of Samar. Indeed, Samar will really continue to fight poverty. And thank you so much once again to our governor. And this time, let's hear from the current congressman of the 2nd Legislative District of Samar Province. She had passed several House bills the tourism in the province, such as declaring the municipality of Basay in the province of Samar as the Banig capital of the Philippines. It is her advocacy to better the lives of the Samarnons and advance the status of Samar to be one of the leading provinces in the country. Well, that is the hope for every one of us here in Samar, right? Ladies and gentlemen, Congresswoman Shari Ann Tan, who will be duly represented by one of the board members of the 2nd District of Samar. Let's welcome Honorable Fe Tan Arcales. We are really sorry because we are experiencing a technical glitch here. So we would like to, for the meantime, acknowledge our collaborators for this event. And for all our viewers right now, we are going to use the hashtag iPOVCON SSU. If you're going to post your photos on this event, kindly use this hashtag. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. We already have on board, once again, I give you Honorable Fetan Arcales, Provincial Board Member.
Thank you, Ma'am. Allow me to read the message of Congresswoman Shari Ann Tan. Dr. Marilyn Cordosa, President of the Samar State University, the host of the Poverty Conference, Dr. Prospero de Vera, Chairperson of the Commission on Higher Education, Dr. Aldrin Darilag, Commissioner of the Commission on Higher Education, Dr. Christopher Galloway, Honorable Reynolds Michael Tan, Governor of the Province of Samar, presidents from the state universities and colleges and higher education institutions in Eastern Visayas, university officials, faculty researchers, other participants, maupay nga aga haaton nga kanan. Poverty alleviation has never been more profound or felt as today. We remain on a standstill with the rest of the world while the current pandemic grips us all in the neck. The Philippine Institute for Development Studies estimated that on top of an economic recession and temporary unemployment, the COVID-19 pandemic will greatly impact the Philippines' goal to reduce poverty and become a middle-class society by 2040. The drop in income and expenditures of households as well as businesses is expected to worsen the poverty conditions due mainly to the prolonged lockdown. Summer may have started right with our experience in Tarangnan. However, the influx of locally stranded individuals and displaced overseas Filipino workers brought in the unexpected result of contamination due to their exposure in high-density risk areas in Metro Manila. Much as the province of Samar wanted to mitigate and lessen the COVID-19 spread, people simply wanted to go home to avoid living in poverty in the metropolis, given that access to food and work has been put on hold. This poverty conference has been a vehicle for the academe to share experiences, best practices, and lessons learned to the local government units, private sector, and other universities outside of Samar in the Philippines. The hosting this year is a testament that the topic of poverty still resonates and should still be part of the narrative. The provincial government of Samar, since the start of the pandemic, has initiated innovative programs to address the new normal. Tourism has been transformed into a virtual tour of our sites with focus on our secret kitchens of Samar. To assess the effect of the pandemic to the Samarnon, the Rapid Economic Impact Assessment, or RIA, came into fruition. It is a tool to address the impact of the pandemic among our people and provide concrete recommendations for economic stimulus. Restarting the economy through infrastructure projects also provided the initial stimulus for our people to be employed and our construction businesses to start anew. However, this is done in a cautious and slow manner since we have to be conscious of the minimum health standards. The Social Amelioration Program and small business wage subsidies were introduced through the Bayanihan Tuhil as one act to somehow cushion the increase of poverty during the middle of this year. This is a temporary stimulus given that the government cannot forever provide dole-outs. Thus, we have to look at other means to help stimulate our economy in Samar. I hope that this conference will somehow address this huge challenge that we are still facing. Allow me to extend my congratulations to the Samar State University for always being at the forefront of the discussion of poverty. As your representative in the 2nd District of Samar, I am one with you as we move towards finding solutions and providing mechanisms through policy making to address the impact of poverty in our province. Thank you and mabuhay.
Thank you so much, Honorable Tan Arcales, representing Congresswoman Sherry Antan. And thank you so much, ma'am, for validating your support to Summer State University on these matters. Our Congresswoman is really a constant support, ladies and gentlemen, to every activity SSU has. And really, no, the government has the main duty of devoting all its effort to empower the poor and give them the strength to fight poverty. And this is what our government here in the Samar Province is doing. Aahon tayo, babangon tayo, and we are going to rise with them. Once again, thank you so much. Of course, the International Poverty Conference wouldn't be a possibility without this woman's vision, because initially this conference is her brainchild, driven by the SSU's mantra of innovating, building, and serving. She will never stop until she sees the change in her community. She being the SSU's leading light, we will move forward marching with songs of victory against this crisis. Ladies and gentlemen, the lady of the hour, the University President of Summer State University, Dr. Marilyn D. Cardoso.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jessa Pacoma. One of the transformational leaders in the world, Nelson Mandela, once said, and I quote, "Overcoming poverty is not a gesture of charity. It is an act of justice. It is the protection of a fundamental human right, the right to dignity and a decent life," unquote. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, overcoming poverty is our responsibility. Distinguished Chairperson of the Commission on Higher Education, Dr. Prospero Popoy de Vera, CHED Commissioner and the Chair Designate of the SSU Board of Regents, Dr. Aldrin A. Darilag, the Governor of the Province of Samar, Honorable Reynolds Michael Tan, the representative of the 2nd District of Samar, Congresswoman Sherry Ann Tan de los Santos, our keynote speaker from New Zealand, the head of the Public Relations Massey University, Auckland, New Zealand, Dr. Christopher Galloway, the University President of Northwest Samar State University, our co-host, Dr. Benjamin Picayo, PASOK 8 President and the University President of Eastern Visayas State University, Dr. Dominador O. Aguirre Jr., PASOK National Vice President for Visayas and the President of Visayas State University, Dr. Edgardo Tulin, the University President of Southern Leyte State University, Dr. Pros Ivy G. Yepes, the University President of University of Eastern Philippines, Dr. Cherry I. Ultra, the University President of Leyte Normal University, Dr. Jude A. Duarte, the University President of Biliran Province State University, Dr. Victor C. Cañeso Jr., the University President of Eastern Samar State University, Dr. Edmundo A. Campoto, the President of Balumpon Institute of Technology, Dr. Norberto C. Olavides, the President of St. Paul's School of Professional Studies, Dr. Erwin Vincent Alcala, the Regional Director of the Department of Science and Technology, Engineer Ernesto Granada, other members of the Board of Regents who are online, and regional directors of the different frontline agencies in Eastern Visayas, officials from the local government units, international faculty researchers from Japan, Malaysia, and Vietnam, faculty researchers from the different universities and offices in the country, members of the SSU faculty and non-teaching staff who are on board, guests and visitors, ladies and gentlemen, good morning to us all. To our guests outside Catbalogan City, allow me to welcome you virtually to Samar State University, Catbalogan City, Samar. The university's strategic plan for 2017 to 2021 targets on poverty reduction for at least 5% in the province of Samar. This advocacy of Samar State University started in 2017 when we staged the first National Poverty Conference and Sustainable Development. We gathered around 154 officials from the LGUs of Samar with 64 faculty researchers from the different state universities and colleges in the country. Varied platforms on poverty mitigation programs and strategies were deliberated by the LGUs and the academe, and some were even recommended for sustainable implementation. Expanding its horizon, the university staged the following year the first International Poverty Conference and Sustainable Development that was on August 14 to 16, 2018, anchored on the theme, what do we know? What should we do? We heard best poverty mitigation practices from the United Nations Development Program, with Dr. Andrew Parker, and from the Asian Ecotourism Network, Bangkok, Thailand, with Professor Albert Teo Chin Kion. Best practices from LGU Bataan, LGU Javier, Leyte, and LGU Samar province, with 32 papers on poverty alleviation that were presented in the CONFA. Maintaining the cess towards poverty reduction, the third National Poverty Conference was staged last September 2019, co-hosted by St. Paul's School of Professional Studies in Tacloban City, that unfolded the many faces of poverty, underscoring the inherent culture of the Filipinos. The conference gathered 201 participants composed of faculty researchers and LGU officials from the country. It ended with noteworthy ideas on poverty mitigation, like research and development endeavors should be relevant to the extension programs and duly aligned to our vision, mission, and core values. Establishment of niche programs as benchmarks for an effective and functional research and extension programs, and the strengthening of innovation capacity for development. Together with our collaborators, the higher education institutions and the LGUs in the region, we will not be tired of rallying poverty alleviation initiatives in the country. An article published last February 2020 in the Philippine Information Agency website presents a silver lining along poverty alleviation advocates. The report revealed that poverty incidence among families in Eastern Visayas in 2018 improved significantly to 24% from 32.9% in 2015. Although the report is not attributable to the conducted poverty conference, it only shows that something is being done, that we are doing something about this problem. Living and rising above the crisis is our theme for this year's International Poverty Conference and Sustainable Development. The theme speaks of our resilience, that whatever comes our way, even COVID-19, we continue our mission to fight poverty. The more that we need to have the same cadence towards poverty alleviation. The socio-economic repercussions brought about by COVID-19 is global. The United Nations framework for the immediate socio-economic response to COVID-19 crisis puts it, and I quote, "The COVID-19 pandemic is far more than a health crisis. It is affecting societies and economies at their core. While the impact of the pandemic will vary from country to country, it will mostly likely increase poverty and inequalities at a global scale, making achievement of SDGs even more urgent," unquote. Exhibiting here in our country, the ASEAN Post in an article titled "COVID-19 Impacts in the Philippines" presented the following pieces of information. The deficit for 2020 is projected to be around 8.1% of GDP, or 1.56 trillion pesos, or 31.5 billion US dollars. Around 7.3 million Filipinos have temporarily or permanently lost their jobs due to business closures because of the pandemic. The Department of Labor and Employment has estimated that around 10 million workers may lose their jobs this year because of the pandemic. Thus, the fight against poverty is even more challenging in this time of pandemic. The data I have shared with you are alarming, and we have to do something about them. This year, we have 4 tracks, namely human health crisis and management, resources, technology, and products for crisis management, organization preparedness and response to crisis, and environmental crisis and management. I am very hopeful of this online gathering that it will bear fruits someday. And at this point, allow me to express how thankful I am with the conduct of this event. My heart speaks of gratefulness, and I cannot help but express it with joy. On behalf of Summer State University academic community, I would like to extend my gratitude and congratulations to our dynamic partners who share their expertise, their unwavering support and commitment. The Commission on Higher Education, Samar Province, our co-host, Northwest Samar State University, our partner SUCs in the region, and HEI in the region. And of course, to our keynote and plenary speakers, our faculty researchers, LGU officials, your presence is inspiring. Your presence manifests your enthusiasm and your dedication towards poverty alleviation. Amidst your hectic schedule, you gave your time in order that you'll be able to share your knowledge and your expertise in these significant collaborations. And to my co-builders in Samar State University, the facilitators from the Office of the Vice President for Research and Extension Services, thank you very much. Let us not be tired of being change agents, armed with our mantra: we innovate, we build, we serve. Thank you and stay safe, everyone. God bless us all.
Thank you so much, Dr. Marilyn D. Cardoso. Well, every time Dr. Cardoso speaks in our yearly held iPOVCON, we really see a glimpse of hope despite this crisis. And she never fails to ignite her hope that the academe could really do so much, that we have a role to play in the development work. And I think it's an extremely exciting opportunity, something that is wonderful that we should really be doing, alleviating poverty. Madam, together with our partners, we will really bear fruit. We will soon reap what we sow. Madam President. Well, poverty has many faces. It is vicious, as what our team says always, malimbong. We define poverty in so many terms, but there's one meaning of poverty that I always keep in my mind. Mother Teresa said that the most terrible poverty is being unloved and not being able to love. Well, loving someone is a reached star for many, but for some, just like me, it is a dream yet to come true. So this time, before we go to our highlight, the Northwest Summer State University Choir to render us an interpretation of the song Pangarap Ko.
ikaw na lang siyang kulang sa buhay kong ito. Pangarap ko, pangarap ko. Ikaw kaya'y nais din akong makapiling at ibigin. O kay sarap namang isipin na tayong dalawa ay isang damdamin. Aking hinihiling na sabihin mo ang nilalaman ng iyong puso. Pangarap ko ang ibigin ka at sa habang panahon ikaw ay makasama. Ikaw na lang ang siyang kulang sa buhay kong ito. Pangarap ko ang ibigin ka. O kay tagal ko nang naghihintay na sa akin ay mag-aalay ng pag-ibig na di magwawakas. Pangarap ko ang ibigin ka at sa haba ng panahon ikaw ay makasama. Ikaw na lang siyang kulang sa buhay kong ito. Pangarap ko, pangarap ko, pangarap ko ang ibigin ka at sa haba ng panahon ikaw ay makasama. Ikaw na lang siyang kulang sa buhay kong ito. Pangarap ko, pangarap ko. Ang ibigin ka. Pangarap ko.
Wow, that was the Northwest Summer State University singers reminding us that poverty is not only about income poverty, it is also about having no one to love. So thank you so much, NWSSC, for reminding us here that poverty could simply be beaten by love. That song is translated in English as I Dream of Loving You. So here in SSU, we also dream of seeing a zero case of poverty. Thus, this iPOVCON. Well, for everyone's information, NWSSU brought home 3 awards from the 4th North Sumatra International Choir Competition held in Indonesia. So thank you so much to NWSSU and of course their choir master, Sir Jonathan T. Robles, the most promising conductor. Yan. So this morning, as we start this year's poverty conference, we are joined by the head of the public relations in Massey University, Auckland, New Zealand. And to introduce our first keynote speaker is the Vice President for Research and Extension Services of Summer State University. Please do the honors, Dr. Ronald L. Orale.
Good morning from Catbalogan City, Samar, the Philippines. In Binisaya, I say maupay nga adlaw hangatanan nga Filipino and foreign participants in this year's iPOVCON. Without much further ado, I am very privileged to introduce one of this year's keynote speakers. Our speaker is not new to the Philippines because for a short period of time, he was once a resident of Cebu City. He is an internationally known scholar of crisis communication, risk communication, and reputation management. He got his PhD in public relations, advertising, and applied communications about 10 years ago from Monash University in Australia. He currently teaches at the Auckland campus, Massey University of New Zealand, and previously taught in Swinburne University of Technology in Australia for nearly 10 years. He is a well-cited researcher with 347 citations and H-index of 12. He has been into numerous conferences in Asia, the Middle East, Australia, Europe, the US, as paper presenter or research person. He is co-editor of a book on issues and crisis management and has published in a range of academic journals, as well as contributing periodic opinion pieces to the New Zealand media. He is a sought-after commentator on crisis and reputation issues. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Dr. Chris Galloway.
Good morning, and thank you very much to the organizers of this important conference for the opportunity to be with you today. I want to acknowledge all the distinguished guests who are present both physically and online. There are too many of them for me to name individually, but I want to thank you for being part of this as well. I was thinking about what the university president, Dr. Marilyn, was saying about staying the course with the challenge of dealing with poverty. Dr. Marilyn, you reminded me of the biblical exhortation that says, "Do not be weary in well-doing, for in due season you will reap if you do not give up." And I guess that's something I want to talk about today, but your comments resonated with me. Of course, I come from the country of New Zealand, where our mantra, as we've been dealing, as you have, with COVID-19, the official government message has been, be safe, be kind. And our indigenous people, the Māori, have a poem during which, during the course of the poem, the question is asked, what is the most important thing? And the answer to that is, he tangata, he tangata, he tangata, which being translated means it is people, it is people, it is people. And that is where I'm coming from today. Before I get started, I want to mention to you that the time gap between your time and my time is about 5 hours. So I can tell you that from what I've seen so far from the future, the day is going to work out just fine. But let me start to talk to you, if I may, about change through communication, building trust and resilience. And by the way, it was mentioned that I used to live in Cebu City. I did. And God willing, when COVID restrictions are lifted, it will be possible to return. I've been back a couple of times since I lived in Cebu, but there's so much more to do and to see. Now, when we think about crisis, we tend typically to think about events that we experience as sudden bolts from the blue, sudden, surprising, intimidating events. But what about chronic crisis? When the elements of crisis are continual and there seems to be little of any relief in sight. When it's experienced over a sustained period, as in the Philippines with its long-running insurgencies, for example, chronic crisis, I think, deserves its own terminology, its own specific consideration. Let us call a chronic crisis a persistent, multifaceted predicament. One way, a dictionary way, if you like, of defining a predicament is to call it a difficult situation from which there is no easy escape. And of course, there is no ready deliverance from decades-long rebellions whose origins are rooted in poverty, corruption, mismanagement, the devastating effects of natural disasters, and more, including, of course, COVID-19. But I ask, does this mean surrendering to despair? I suggest that it does not, no matter how dire the situation, as I know it is in a number of parts of the Philippine Republic. I like what South Africa's Archbishop Desmond Tutu once said when he remarked that hope is being able to see that there is light despite all the darkness. But I firmly believe that that hope needs to be anchored in an equally firm expectation that an altered state is actually possible, that our present reality does not need to continually constrain our future. Thinking about this assertion, I recall that change can be described as the process of making something different. And it is now that making different that I want to talk about. A key aspect of change is how to communicate the desired transformation. Often when we think about making societal improvements, we think about those as being confined to, for example, creating better infrastructure or developing signature projects designed to mitigate a risk. Naturally, these are important, but in designing such activities, I think it is possible to ignore the fact that communication is foundational to build and sustain public support. But it's not any kind of communication that will do. Research suggests that when people are stressed, angry, or upset, their ability to hear, remember, and understand information can be seriously degraded, sometimes by as much as 80%. Excuse me. That effect demands simple, but I stress not simplistic communication that clearly spells out what is to be done, how, and when. And it's here that I believe local government units have a vital role to play, as of course national agencies also do. But it is one thing to offer well-designed communication and quite another to get citizens to accept it. That demands trust, and trust calls for people to experience trustworthiness over time. Mere rhetoric alone will not do. Citizens will have had enough of the so-called rhetoric-reality gap. And I'm sure that that is as true of the Philippines as it is true of my own country. As one author, Jane Edwards, put it, any journey of transformation begins with the willingness and ability to question the philosophy upon which current practices are founded. That is to grasp the notion that change is possible and to be prepared to resist the apathy that so often goes with a state of chronic crisis. So how then can trust be built? Trust that starts to deny persistent predicaments the soil in which they grow. One answer lies in what is variously called social learning or social copying. That is when exemplar individuals, perhaps barangay captains and other officials, demonstrate at least some of the desired behaviours, such as choosing to resist the lure of easy money or other corrupt practices. Others looking on them can follow their example, especially when social acceptance is part of the benefit. Such group-based approaches can provide a basis for pushing back against corrosive antisocial activities, including the propaganda from whatever source that comes, that reduces chronic conditions to simplistic sloganeering, that promises a better life, but in the end becomes a deceptive declaration of a future that somehow never quite arrives. As I mentioned a moment ago, such hollow pronouncements can produce the kind of despair that immobilizes rather than motivates people. Hope becomes a scarce commodity, and citizens focused on their own thriving can tend to ignore the fact that they are part of an organic system. It takes all in a society to be thriving for a single individual to do well. Naturally, I'm not so naive to think that elites will not continue to seek to advance their own interests, even if that is at the cost of the well-being of the whole community. Excuse me a moment, please. Nor is it realistic, I think, to ignore the embeddedness of poverty and other social ills, or the lasting effects of natural disasters on the social and economic fabric. Yet when the need for change is truly grasped at a society's governance levels, progress can occur, even if it looks that we are climbing a very high mountain. In my own country, the Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, just a few days ago returned to power in a landslide with nearly half of the vote, appointed herself Minister for Child Poverty Reduction. And under our government's Child Poverty Reduction Act, the statistics authorities in New Zealand are required to report annually on 9 different measures for child poverty. 3 of those measures form the basis of the government's 3-year and 10-year targets for reducing child poverty. According to the PM, there have been some advances on 7 of the 9 indicators, although those gains are relatively small so far, and there remains a very long road ahead. I acknowledge, of course, that New Zealand's dilemmas are not entirely the same as those in the Philippines, but we do share the issues of persistent social and economic inequities that seem to be growing greater. We share also a vulnerability to natural disasters. Not all that long ago, we had to cope with a significant volcanic eruption in which a number of people lost their lives. We share also the challenge of how to achieve sustainable improvements. So let's talk about the predicaments I mentioned earlier. I want to introduce you to the work of some scholars and others who developed an approach to change known as appreciative inquiry. This was developed as a conscious alternative to what they called the problem-solution loop. In other words, the frustration we experience when we think that we've solved a problem, just got that done, only to confront another problem and then yet another. Appreciative inquiry is based on the notion that in every organization, in every system, there is something that is working well. Our task, they say, is to find out what that is, to amplify it and to enlarge it. This doesn't mean ignoring the issues, but it does mean seeing them from a different perspective. Take any society, no matter how fractured, struggling, or resource constrained. Something will be working well. Perhaps it's no more than people's willingness, their basic fundamental willingness to help each other out in tough times. And I know that's true of many places in the Philippines. Appreciative inquiry says that this positivity is worth leveraging, making more of, and valuing. And that is because it's been shown that when people are moving into a new future, they are most comfortable when taking something from the present or the past with them. And if they're going to do that, then what is carried forward might as well be the best of the present or the past. But the key is that you don't assume that you know what that is. Hence the inquiry bit, where you seek to discover what it is that helps to drive people's resilience, their willingness to do more than just cope. Communicators, such as I am, would call that knowing your audience. And the only way you know your audience is to ask audience members about what matters to them. It's not about dropping down messaging from on high. That, I think, is a surefire recipe for producing resistance to what's being said. So one challenge to LGUs and other official bodies, as you consider how to help citizens in various ways, would be to invest in paying attention to what citizens really think. Appreciative inquiry goes on to suggest that we consider how to make the best of our experience, that is, what is working well, more like the norm, and then work out how to design and deliver a better experience. All this might well sound like what Kiwis would call pie in the sky, a set of fanciful ideas. It might well be asked, how can you envisage a better future and imagine rising above the crisis when your family is poor, there's a typhoon bearing down, and you know that your house offers totally inadequate protection? When life is being lived on the edge, catchphrases are pretty cold comfort. But this is where the social copying I talked about earlier can play a part. The great Russian writer Leo Tolstoy once said, "Everyone thinks of changing the world, but no one thinks of changing himself." If they are willing to accept the challenge, our community leaders, whether they hold an official position or not, can play a key part in modeling the change that is needed. But individual citizens need also to, as Tolstoy so memorably said, be willing to make their own choices. Now, undoubtedly, it's easy for me to prescribe this when I do so from a relatively comfortable Western-style democracy, which has done well in conquering COVID, does not have an armed insurgency to deal with, and only occasionally has to confront a devastating natural disaster, although, as I've mentioned, the latter seem to be becoming more common. But you may be encouraged to know that the kind of change that I'm talking about has already been proven in diverse countries using an approach called positive deviance. Called PD for short, positive deviance tackles behavioral and social change based on the observation that in any community, there are people whose uncommon but successful behaviors or strategies enable them to find better solutions to a problem than their peers, despite facing similar challenges and having no extra resources or knowledge than their peers. These people are known as positive deviants. The concept is reminiscent of the appreciative inquiry methodology I mentioned earlier, and it first appeared in nutrition research in the 1970s. Researchers found that despite the poverty in a community, some poor families had well-nourished children. Some researchers suggested using information gathered from these families to plan nutrition programs, which has since been done and done in a number of countries and in a number of other areas as well, to resounding success. There are 5 key principles on which positive deviance is founded. The first is the recognition that communities already have the solutions and are the best experts to solve their own problems. The second recognizes that communities can self-organize and already have the human resources and social assets to solve an agreed upon problem. I've talked about the importance of community leaders and their example, but positive deviance goes further and says that intelligence, know-how are not only concentrated in the leadership of a community alone or in experts who come from outside. Rather, it is distributed throughout the community. PD aims to draw on this collective intelligence to apply it to a specific problem requiring behavior or social change. The fourth principle is about sustainability. And the final key idea is this, that it is easier to change behavior by practicing it than simply knowing about it. As they say, it is easier to act your way into a new way of thinking than to think your way into a new way of acting. Academics would call this kinesthetic learning, or learning by doing. What all this means here is that our communication needs to be focused on fostering action, not just on providing information. It also means producing communication that encourages positive deviants to tell their stories and share them with others. It means presenting exemplars and leaving it to the community itself how to make necessary adaptations. If you add PD to appreciative inquiry, you have a powerful toolbox to help barangays and their residents to rise above the crises that they face. Someone once said, we don't see things as they are, we see them as we are. As many others have noted, the change we need must begin with us. The Chinese word for crisis combines the characters for dangerous or precarious and the character for a change point. In the face of crisis, we can allow ourselves to be intimidated by precarity, or we can choose to pivot at the change point. No prize for guessing which I would be advocating. As Gloria Macapagal Arroyo once said, the power of one, if fearless and focused, is formidable, but the power of many working together is better. Ang Dios ay Samaya. Thank you very much for the opportunity of sharing with you this morning. If there is an opportunity for any questions or comments, I'm more than happy to respond.
Wow, and that was our keynote speaker this morning, Dr. Galloway. All I can say to our keynote speaker this morning is we are going to climb the mountain and reach the summit with your help. And I am sure of that, sir, because of your help and the takeaways we had from you today, especially because you mentioned that you lived in Cebu. That means you know the situation here in the Philippines, right, sir?
Yes.
Yes, sir. So you have talked about the appreciative inquiry, the key principles of the positive deviance, changing ourselves, you said, before changing the world, and be willing to make your own choices. And on that note, sir, allow me to ask, if it's not too much, no, can you share the product of appreciative inquiry principles of Massey University, which could help us benchmark in alleviating each and every poverty loop?
Sure. Appreciative inquiry actually came out of some doctoral work that was being done in the world famous medical center in the US called the Cleveland Clinic. A PhD researcher came back to his supervisor and said, I'm blown away by the positivity I found in this part of the clinic. And the wise supervisor said, I recommend that you focus on this. And what he realized was that a lot of what happened or was happening in the organization was very much based on the way people framed these developments in their own thinking. He realized, to give you a related example, his wife was an artist, and he realized that he could look at a shed in a field, a hut in a field. He could see something that needed removing and replacing with something nice and shiny. But his wife would see it as the subject of a painting. And he felt that and has since argued that not only in every organization or system is something working well, and it's our job to find that out and amplify it, but also that human beings are like plants. Plants turn towards the sun to get their energy and to grow. And so he argued that human beings are, the academic term is heliotropic. We turn towards that which gives us energy and life. That is governed by how we speak about things. If we speak only negativity about the many challenges that we face, we'll get more of it. The principle in appreciative inquiry is you get more of what you focus on. So if we're able to focus on what is working well, it doesn't mean ignoring the things that aren't, but it does mean that if we concentrate our energy and our resources on what is working well, we greatly improve our chances of getting more of that. I could probably talk for a long, long time about appreciative inquiry, but I'm conscious of time. I hope those further comments are a help.
That is indeed true, Dr. Galloway. Well, as he said, when we talk about appreciative inquiry principles, we talk about speak about things will mean a lot, right? And you get more of what you focus on, and that is what
Absolutely.
appreciative inquiry is. And we must always concentrate our energy on the resources we have, and say instead of what we do not have. So that's the principle of the appreciative inquiry. So thank you so much, Dr. Galloway. We have more here for you, sir. Another question: how does New Zealand continue to resolve the fight against COVID-19, which causes economic poverty? And having heard that your country has been COVID-19 free, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, the honest answer would be because the central bank continues to print a lot of money. But, I think it is true that
But it is the
the honest answer is that, but it is also true that we've had some inspirational leadership, both from our Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Jacinda Ardern, who is focused on her mantra was, let's go hard and go early. And so we had some very severe lockdowns, as you may know. But we also had an inspirational Director General of the health system in the country, who was giving a constant stream of advice to the government. And there was, because of the leadership that was genuinely or perceived to be authentic and inspirational, there was built a very strong social consensus around supporting that. It doesn't mean that everything has gone perfectly, it hasn't. But as a very small country of only 5 million people, and I should say about 30 to 40 million sheep, we have this social acceptance that I know not every country has for the restrictions that we have had to live under. We are now in what we call level 1, which pretty much means that life is more or less normal, except that our borders remain largely closed. However, the government continues to stress the importance of contact tracing. Every organization and business is meant to display a QR code that people should scan when they enter to help with the contact tracing. And the restrictions at our borders seem to be working particularly well. So there's an integrated effort, but one that was done at pace. The government's website for its COVID-19 response was literally developed overnight. And so they have moved very, very quickly. So the other aspect has been a quick, very firm response.
All right, so a quick and firm response, sir, from the leaders. So the
Correct.
leaders really have a key role in fighting against COVID-19. And we also hope that here in the Philippines, you would also be COVID-19 free, just like in New Zealand, sir.
Well, if you're COVID-19 free and as we are, then I can come visit and I look forward to that.
Yes, sir, please. We would love to have you here in the Philippines, specifically here in Samar State University. Sir, when everything gets better, we invite you.
Thank you. I would be delighted to come. I've been joking with the colleagues that I've been having Zoom sessions with about balut and hala halo and other delicacies. So
Yes, sir. There are so many delicacies here in the Philippines. Here in
correct.
Samar, we also have many delicacies. So while we are still waiting for that time to come, that the Philippines will be COVID-19 free, we are hoping also that for the meantime, we could visit New Zealand.
Yes. Yes, we would welcome you. There are many Filipinos in New Zealand. As I move around, when I hear a Philippine accent, I say to them, "Where in the Philippines are you from?" And sometimes they say, "Oh, you recognize my accent." But we have many Filipinos here. And before COVID, there was a direct air link between Manila and Auckland on Philippine Airlines, which I hope will soon be running again.
Well, that's so nice to hear, sir. Filipinos are really all over the world. Well,
Correct.
another question here, sir, for you. Sir, can you please share these inequalities that hinder in combating poverty?
Yeah. One of the big issues in New Zealand is the fact that our Indigenous people, the Maori, and what we call Pacifica people from the islands of the Pacific, are typically overrepresented in poverty statistics, health statistics, and other areas. For example, Maori represent a significant proportion of those who are presently incarcerated. And so the government devotes significant resources to helping them out of their situation and to improving their economic and health outcomes. One of the things that helps New Zealand, I think, especially when compared to our neighbour Australia, is that the relationship between the Indigenous people, the Maori, and the government is overseen by a treaty that was signed around 150 years ago between representatives of the major tribes and the British Crown as it was at that time. And subsequently, the Crown, the governing authorities, broke some of the provisions of that treaty, stole land, and produced other inequities. And the effects are still being felt today, but about 3 decades ago, the government of the day established a tribunal to hear claims for recompense. And since then, Maori tribes have received significant wealth transfers with the expectation that they will use the resources to improve the lot of their people. So as well as the government directly doing things to improve the lot of those who are not doing so well in society, there is a mechanism by which land and other resources can be transferred to the control of the Indigenous people for them to invest and for them to use in their own self-development. And there are some notable cases of this working incredibly well. For example, one Maori tribe, the tribe that is represented throughout our South Island, controls around 50% of New Zealand's fishing quota and does well out of that. So I hope that's a little indication as to how we approach that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Galloway, for answering that question. So you're talking about the compensation which had happened, and the Mary, they were able to have the wealth transfers. So thank you so
Yes.
much, sir, for that input. Well, another question we have here says, how can we make people move or act when they are hungry or unemployed?
Well, one of the things that the government here has done is that it, as part of its COVID-19 response, it introduced a wage subsidy to help keep people in jobs. So businesses that could confirm, or that is to produce evidence that they had lost at least 30% of their revenue because of COVID-19, could have the wages of their staff subsidized up to a certain level. Now that program has finished. It's been replaced by a revised version, but there was considerable support through that. And there is also support for those people who do not have a job, a kind of a job seeker allowance. But it would be true to note also that our food bank system, where charities, churches, and others provide food to those who are struggling, have been experiencing high demand. And so I would not pretend that everything is all okay here. So I guess what I'm saying is that the response is a mixture of government initiatives and a mix of the NGO sector's initiatives. And while it's challenging, many people are being supported to get through these difficult times.
All right, sir. So it boiled down to the initiatives of the people and
Yeah, that's right.
Dr. Galloway, we have another question here. I'm really sorry because the internet connection was lost. If we make people change how they think and act, are we not changing something cultural?
The change, the persuasion to get people to change the way they think and act ought to be based on cultural norms and cultural experiences. So, for example, in New Zealand, there is a strong emphasis on Maori tradition, Maori language, also for our Pacific Island people. So we should not do things that cut across culture, but encourage people to look at the challenges they face through an appropriate culturally based lens. So one of the examples would be that Maori people and Pacifica people are more focused on the tribe or the family, and in the case of Pacific people, very much the church. So trying to persuade them to do something different needs to take account of the viewpoints and beliefs of the tribe, the church, the family, the large, often family units, not to cut across them, because there is a thing that you'd know called confirmation bias, which says that often we try to limit what we take in by choosing not to listen to things that don't agree with what we already know or believe. That can be counterproductive. So those who are seeking to encourage a change of behavior need to take those cultural issues into account.
All right, thank you so much, sir. Another question for you, sir, here says, who identifies something that
Who identifies what works? Okay. Did I get the question right?
I'm going to repeat, sir. Who identifies something that works well? Is it the people or the public officials?
No, the people. Imagine that at Samar State University, we were going to do an appreciative inquiry process. And there's much more to tell you about that, but it would start by if I was involved in doing it, for example, sitting down with you and sitting down with everyone and saying, what can you think of a time when what you're about as a person came together with what the university is about as an institution in some memorable way? That would represent a peak experience, the best that we were talking about before. And if you do this throughout the organization, you can then start to look for themes. And out of those themes, you can derive a picture of what a peak experience for the organization would look like. And then you can start to dream a bit and say, well, what would life be like if we lived it at that peak experience level as the norm instead of the way that we do? What would our meetings be about? What kind of concerns would we have? How different would things be? And then the final stages of the process have to do with designing the change and implementing it, and delivery is the name they give to the final stage. So this is a well-proven approach that has much research around it.
Now that I would say, sir, is living and rising above the crisis. Going, sir, back to what you have told us about positive deviance and appreciative inquiry. If we put it in an equation, what massive results will PD plus appreciative inquiry yield?
I think it will, well, for a start, positive deviance is based on the community leveraging its own resources. When I mentioned that this concept came out of nutrition research, and what the researchers found when they looked at the positive deviance, the people who were living in a poor community, but still had children who were not malnourished, they found that the parents in those families were using local foods. They weren't buying, for example, mass-produced foods. They were using foods that were readily available. And instead of feeding their children just once or twice a day, they were giving them, I guess, smaller meals 3 or 4 times a day. So they weren't reliant on handouts from outside. And that is not to put down the idea of people receiving outside assistance. It's just this, in this research, this is not what was happening. They were using their own resources. With appreciative inquiry, what you come out with is something that draws on people's motivations. If you were to ask me, what is it, what can you think of as a time when what I'm about as a person came together in a memorable way with what the university is about, I would be talking to you about situations where I was able to help students who were in some kind of dilemma or distress. And then if we were to go through the process, we would be identifying that as my motivation and perhaps looking at how many other people had that kind of motivation and how can we focus that kind of pastoral care as a more integral part of what the whole university is about. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, sir. Indeed, that truly makes sense, sir. Thank you so much. And sir, are you ready to hear from our active audience? Because they're really interested on your talk and they have more questions for you. So we'll go to our live audience here in Zoom and they will ask you personally their questions. So anybody from our Zoom participants who would like to raise their questions, this is your moment to ask those questions and those things regarding Dr. Galloway's topic while he's still with us this morning. Anybody from the academe, from the DepEd, from the Department of Health, from Summer State University, from our collaborators, if you would like to ask question, you could unmute your microphone and you could just butt in. Anybody from the DOST or from our key partners from the local government units? I'm sure you have many things to know more. You want to know more about Dr. Galloway's talk. And also, if you are quite we are still waiting for your questions. If you are still thinking of the things you're going to ask to our speaker, you could just type it in our chat box here in Zoom, or we are encouraging every one of you to please unmute your microphone and you could just speak and directly ask your questions to Mr. Galloway, to Dr. Galloway. Anyway, Dr. Galloway, your talk is really remarkable and we have learned so much from you.
It's been my great pleasure to be involved and to be sharing with you. I will dip in and out of the conference over the next couple of days, later today and tomorrow and the next day, but I do wish you a very successful conference and the build-up of some momentum to address these critical issues that the conference has been called to address.
Indeed, sir. So thank you so much. Despite of your hectic schedule, you have still time for us and to be with us on this International Poverty Conference. Dr. Galloway, it is really an honor to have you with us.
My honor as well. Thank you.
It seems like you have brought us to New Zealand. It is a free ticket to New Zealand. Thank you, sir, once again.
You'll come.
Sir, do you want to say anything to our guests and live audience here in Zoom?
Well, one of the things that I would like to say to the representatives of the LGUs is that they can play through effective communication a critical part in helping to build community resilience and helping communities to live and rise above the crisis. And one of the things that when people are considering introducing communication programs is they can think that it's all expensive, that you have to buy TV time or radio time or whatever. That might be part of it, but I believe that fundamentally effective communication at a community level can be simple, but not simplistic, and that LGUs have a great role to play. And it may be that if there are perceptions that there is room for doing things better, it may be that the LGUs need some resourcing or some training, which the universities can assist with to improve the level of communication both to the communities and within the communities. I hope that makes sense. This is not a criticism of the LGUs. It's just when you look at the way that local government, for example, in my own country, communicates with residents, there is a fair amount of material that comes out, but there is a greater need to ask the people what they really think and design communication accordingly. One of the key things is to keep the messages simple, to have no more than 3 key messages, because it's been found that the human brain can really only process 3 things at once.
All right, sir. Indeed, that is true, sir. The LG really plays a great role in building the resilience of the community. And that's what you said. We need resourcing and we need training. And we are glad to say that the SUCs here in Eastern Visayas regularly do extension services to help the LGU. So we are partnering with LGU every time.
Right. I'd just like to respond to a couple of things that have come through on the chat.
Yes, sir, please.
Says, this is from Henrietta. I want to know how to maintain the intrinsic motivation among the people so that whatever program initiated will be sustained. When you do an appreciative inquiry process, you are drilling down to people's intrinsic motivation. So if they can be recruited to the process of change, it's going to help people to keep going. But one of the other things that I think is a challenge is just thinking in terms of programs rather than sustained activities. And what I'm trying to say here is that programs often have a start point and an end point. What we want to achieve is sustainability and longevity in what we do. You can achieve that by having a sequence of programs that, for example, each of which lasts for a year. Even better, though, if you follow the positive deviance approach and are looking for the community to self-organize. If the community self-organizes, then it has the ability to sustain its response. So I'm not against programs, but what I'm saying is often programs that officials in our country anyway initiate have a finite start and a finite end. Well and good. We need to rejoice in the benefits that these programs can bring, but what we want is longer term change. And that won't be achieved in the scope of one program or two programs necessarily. I hope that's useful, Henrietta. The other thing is a comment from Irene saying, I think what is missing in the effort is that when the crisis is over, people should get back to their own, even slowly, but should not be dependent. One of the things that is true about crisis communication and crisis management is that the most challenging period is actually the period after the worst of the crisis. Because once you have dealt with the most demanding aspects of crisis incident response, many people, and understandably so, just want to get on with life. However, to do that can sometimes involve people failing to stop to analyze what went well and what went less well in the crisis response, and to capture those learnings for the sake of future responses. So the post-crisis period can be a very important phase where you can adjust your crisis planning, you can think towards the next one, and so on. Again, I don't want to take your time to go into that in detail, only to stress the fact that the most challenging period can be once the worst is over. People need to be encouraged not to simply move on, but to stop for long enough to say, well, what is it that we learn from this crisis? What is it that we can capture for our future information so we can do better next time?
Definitely, Dr. Galloway. Well, Dr. Irene, or Dr. Elmer Irene, is the Director for International Affairs here in Summer State University. And he has a question here because he was about to ask about your insights about people living in benefits from the government and being dependent on it. What can you say about it, sir?
What I can say is it's a big problem.
Yeah.
We have people who, since a social welfare system was introduced into New Zealand in the 1930s, we have had a certain degree of generational welfare dependency. But the sorts of things that our government tries to do when it provides benefits to people who are seeking jobs, for example, is that it assigns a case manager to someone who is looking for a job, and people have to turn up to job interviews or to relevant discussions about that individual's circumstances, or their benefit can be cut. So what I'm saying is there are some controls, some incentives, some sanctions occasionally that help to mitigate this welfare dependency. But it is still far too big an issue in our society as I know it is elsewhere. And there are various agencies, both government agencies and NGO and church-based agencies, that work with unemployed people or people seeking jobs to assist them into the workforce. And this includes people who've been incarcerated and are now released back into the community, giving help to those people as well. But successive governments here have worked hard to reduce the number of people on benefits. Right now, it's historically high because of the impact of COVID-19.
Noted, sir.
I hope that responded. I have a question from Rodney saying New Zealand is the first country which successfully controlled COVID. What are the possible strategies implemented by New Zealand that can be an effective response in the Philippines? Number one, the messaging was consistent. Okay, it was consistent over time. Like, wear a mask, stay in your bubble, and wash your hands for 20 seconds frequently. So it was consistent. It was communicated across multiple channels, everything from posters to TV ads, to radio ads and so on. The government put a face to the COVID response. The Prime Minister, who already had significant social respect because of the way she handled a massacre at a mosque in one of our cities, herself, together with our Director General of Health, who came across as a very calm and competent and collected person, they gave this consistent messaging, which was reinforced by a very strict lockdown initially. And then as that was ultimately lifted to some degree, there was another severe lockdown. We literally had, I live in the main city of Auckland, we literally had military and police on all roads leading in and out of Auckland, where the situation was a bit worse than elsewhere in the country. So a very firm response. So it's not being afraid to take unpopular measures. Contact tracing I've mentioned. At one stage, our military was brought in, and they're still involved, to help resource the police and others who were involved. So a coordinated and a consistent response based on simple, repeated messages across multiple channels. There's another question saying we have an effective partnership with minorities. Why was it so? I think the fact is that New Zealand is a fairly liberal society. We are a highly multicultural society. In fact, it has been assessed that the city I live in is more culturally diverse than either London or Sydney, which might surprise you. We have on the north shore of Auckland, and I live a little bit north of that, but on the north shore of Auckland, around 25% of the population has some kind of Asian heritage, a much higher proportion than that of the Indigenous people or Pacific people. So we're a very diverse society. And I think that helps. And the government is very welcoming of that diversity. We have a Human Rights Commission. We have anti-discrimination laws, those sorts of things that also help. When it comes to our Indigenous people, the Māori, there is a Māori language television station, a national station. There are also radio stations throughout the country for Māori tribes in their own language. We also have a network of schools and starting at a very young age, kindergarten age, which are conducted in the Māori language for those people who want to go there. Sorry, that's a long response, but I hope it's a helpful one. There's a question from the DAR regional office about how do we set the border on toxic positivity in the appreciative inquiry process. I'm not quite sure what the questioner means about toxic positivity, but I'm guessing that the notion is positivity that is we might call spin or propaganda. That's not what appreciative inquiry is about. Ultimately, you have to be able to trust the people who are communicating with you, and if that trust isn't there, then the communication won't work. That's an obvious statement, but for the sake of saying it. I once spoke at a conference in Iran, and the one question I got at the end was, how can we get people to trust our media? I said, well, think about sources of communication that you do trust, people in your social network. I see a question, may we know some of the practices in your country in helping people value education? Do you believe that it really is connected to poverty reduction? And the answer is this. The government, it depends on the type of education we're talking about. The government right now is incentivizing people to do vocational education. So our economy has historically depended a lot on foreign workers. For example, right now there is a crisis. We can't get enough workers from overseas to help our horticultural industry with picking apples and other fruit. But they have recognized that in order to grow our domestic economy, we need more people who are equipped to handle trades. University funding is presently capped. And so all of our universities are facing financial deficits, financial issues, because we don't have international students right at the minute. But the government is continuing to invest heavily in education at different levels. Is education really connected to poverty reduction? I would say simply yes. Yes. One of the things that we have found is that there are some businesses that say they are more interested in people who have certain types of skills than a university degree. And some employers here will regard a degree as a hygiene factor, as just something to be expected, and look at other qualities of the person presenting for a job. But yes, I think there is a link between education and poverty reduction, but that link works most robustly if the education concerned is sensitive to what industry and the wider economy is looking for in terms of trained people. I've been asked to share my thoughts on tourism. Before COVID, tourism was the #1 export earner for our country. And when you're able to come, please all come and help support our tourism industry. And if we go back on Philippine Airlines, we can support yours. But what the response has been of our tourism authorities is to promote travel within the country. So there are incentives and deals for people to see our country rather than go overseas. I have a question from Mr. Jason. How is the partnership with the government in New Zealand's minorities and Indigenous people? Does it contribute in poverty reduction and sustainable development? Yes, it does through multiple programs, as I mentioned before. I have an issue of what is one best practice or program of the University of New Zealand that has a significant impact on poverty alleviation. I think it would have to be through creating special departments or offices within the university, and all of our universities, to my knowledge, would have this, dealing with the particular needs of, for example, our Māori Indigenous people and our Pacific people, and providing scholarships and assistance for them to apply and throughout the university career. So we're looking to see more and more people from our Māori and Pacific populations acquire university qualifications, because they tend to have larger families, and in the case of Māori, have tribal links. When one person within the family or the community is university qualified and able to earn an appropriate salary based on that qualification, the benefits don't just flow to that one individual. Shall we keep going? I've got another question here.
Yes, sir. Is it okay, sir?
I'm fine. The sun
Thank
is
you so
shining
much, sir.
outside. It's not raining, although you're probably getting monsoon rains where you are.
You already have many bonus inputs from you, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. What school-based mental health program do you particularly implement in your country amidst this pandemic? Well, it's not only school-based, but we have a simple 4-digit number that anyone in the country can dial at any time of the day or night to access some mental health assistance. So my understanding would be that it's a free number. I haven't called it, but I think it's 1722 or something like that. Free telephone-based mental health support. Looked like someone called Simon wanted to ask a question, but I can't see it there, Simon.
Well, maybe he's still typing, sir.
Maybe.
All right. Anyway, sir, I guess we got so much from you already, sir, and we are so honored to have you with us as our keynote speaker. All our thanks to you, Dr. Galloway. You are remarkable.
Well, bless
And
you for
because
that.
of your, yes, thank you, sir. Because of your contribution to this conference, our gratitude can never be summoned into words. So maybe we can start by awarding you this certificate of recognition. So allow me, sir, to read the citation. Certificate
much.
of recognition is awarded to Dr. Christopher Galloway in grateful recognition for his invaluable insights and expertise rendered as keynote speaker during the Second International Conference on Poverty, Alleviation, and Sustainable Development held on October 21 to 23, 2020, given this 21st day of October 2020. Signed, the chair of the International Poverty Conference, our president, Dr. Marilyn D. Cardoso, and the co-chair, International Poverty Conference 2020, Dr. Benjamin L. Picayo. Sir, I believe our university president of Summer State University has something to say. Dr. Marilyn D. Cardoso.
Dr. Marilyn, thank you so very much.
Dr. Chris Galloway, thank you very much for the gift of time. Thank you for being so generous in sharing your knowledge and your expertise to the participants, and for being part of our second International Poverty Conference 2020, which is also our first virtual conference. We will never forget you. We look forward to have you again in the Philippines, particularly here in Summer State University, Catalogan City, sir. Thank you very much on behalf of Summer State University and our partner, SUCs and HE region. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And can I just add, I see some kind thanks from the Department of Tourism in the Eastern Visayas, the Department of Education Regional Office. If there is anything that I can contribute to departments like these through SSU, then I am happy to assist in any way that I can to just contribute what I know from this end. So please take my willingness to help for granted, and thank you again for the honor and the privilege of being able to share in this conference today.
All thanks once again to you, Dr. Galloway. You are really our iPOVCON hero. We feel special to work with you today, Dr. Galloway, hoping we'll be able to work with you again in the future. Once again, thank you, sir.
Looking forward to that. Thank you so much. Okay, bye for now.
Bye, sir. Thank you so much. Acknowledging the President of Accrediting Agency of Chartered Colleges and Universities of the Philippines, we acknowledge the Tarlac State University President, Dr. Mirna Q. Malyari. Thank you so much, Dr. Malyari, for joining us also. We are so honored for your virtual presence. Once again, that was Dr. Chris Galloway, our keynote speaker for this morning. Wow, what a way to start this iPOVCON 2020. That's it, gentle ladies and men, the opening program of the International Poverty Conference 2020. This morning, I'm sure you share the same sentiments that I have on what poverty really is. Once again, thank you so much, Dr. Galloway, Congresswoman Sherry Antan, duly represented by Honorable Fe Arcales, Governor Michael Tan, SEC Presidents of Eastern Visayas, the LGUs, and the whole iPOVCON community. All of us here in Summer State University Convention Center are all up for this challenge of alleviating poverty. This is a conference for a difference, a movement, a call to live and rise above the crisis. We are so excited to hear from our presenters and what we are going to get from this 3-day event. Surely, this is a step towards attaining the Ambisyon Natin 2040. This year, it's bigger, bolder, and historic more than ever. Join us. And let's start to end the vicious cycle of poverty as we continue this afternoon until Friday. You wouldn't want to miss it out, right? The iPOVCON team were able to gather the best of the best, or in French, the la crème de la crème speakers and panelists from the different parts of the world. This afternoon, we'll have the youngest CHED commissioner in history to talk to us this afternoon. On day 2, almost 50 researchers will be presenting their papers on the 4 tracks of the iPOVCON, and gracing our event tomorrow is the CHED chairperson himself for his keynote speech. And on the last day, brace yourselves because we'll have 2 keynote speakers back to back. This is like being 2 places in one day, since our speakers are all the way from Vietnam and Australia. And by the end, we will be announcing the winners of the different tracks, the so-called iPOVCON victors. We also acknowledge the presence of our key partners here in Summer State University, from DOST, from NEDA. Thank you so much. From PSWDO Pangasinan, from Tacloban City, from all over the Philippines. Thank you so much for joining us there this morning. We also acknowledge the DOT, yes. So, iPOVCON warriors, are you ready to live and rise above the crisis? Please say yes to us. It's a yes or a yes, and because you are with us, I think it's a sure nod. Remember, iPOVCON warriors, the key to overcoming poverty is in your hands. Thank you so much for acknowledging. What power can poverty have over a collaboration of people in Eastern Visayas with a consciousness of the untold riches brought by protecting the human right to dignity and a decent life? Let's protect each other. Let's race iPOVCON 2020. See you this afternoon, everyone. And we are going to use the same link this afternoon in Zoom. And to end this morning event, we are going to have once again the NWSSU singers to give us a cultural show, the Alibangbang. Once again, see you this afternoon. We are going to give the link of the attendance this afternoon, and we'll see you at exactly 12:30 in the afternoon. Thank you, everyone, and keep safe.
Ladies
Could you
and
unmute your
gentlemen,
microphone?
Northwest Summer State University.
Wow, thank you so much once again to NWSSU for that amazing production, a cultural show entitled Alibangbang. So we are also acknowledging our Chad Regional Office Regional Director, Dr. George M. Colorado. Thank you so much for joining us. And we are also acknowledging the other officials we have here from Chad, of course, from DOH. We also have some from PSWDO. Hello po, Ma'am Almasita. Thank you so much for joining us from DOT, from DOST, from Chad Regional Office too. We are also acknowledging from Chad Caraga, Palawan Aid International, Kabataan View Schools Incorporated, PSA, DOT. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much for joining us, everyone. We hope that you will stay with us until the end of the iPOVCON 2020. So this event will last until Friday afternoon. We are also acknowledging our presidents from the different Eastern Visayas SUCs. We are acknowledging Dr. Benjamin L. Picayo, our co-host this year, Dr. Erwin Vincent Alcala of the St. Paul School of Professional Studies, our co-host last year, Dr. Victor C. Canyazo Jr., the president of Liran Province State University, Dr. Edmundo Camputo, president of Eastern Samar State University, our president of the Eastern Visayas State University, Dr. Dominador O. Aguirre, our president of Leyte Normal University, Dr. Jude A. Duarte, Dr. Norberto C. Olavides, our president of Palumpon Institute of Technology. We are also acknowledging Dr. Bros Ivy G. Yepes, the president of Southern Leyte State University, Dr. Cherry I. Ultra, president of University of the Eastern Philippines, and the president of Visayas State University, Dr. Edgardo E. Tulin. We are also acknowledging our viewers on YouTube, Bacolod and CPDO Bacolod. Another one, thank you so much for joining us this morning, NHA our Regional Office 8 and DHO Regional Office 10. DOH, we are also acknowledging our partners, the Regional Office Director of the Department of Health, Region 10. Thank you so much for joining us. See you once again this afternoon.